we're in the Omer, right? The period of time between Pesach and Shavuot, which really should be a happy time. Why? And one of the reasons we're told why we count the Omer is kind of like a countdown, right? Because we're so excited to get the Torah, so we're counting down the days. So how did this time period turn into a period of mourning, semi-mourning, right? We don't have weddings, we don't listen to live music, for 33 of the days of the Omer.
A period of mourning because so many students died of Rabbi Akiva's.
Yeah. So Rabbi Akiva, and it says it on the source on the paper right there, had 12,000 pairs of students. That's 24,000 students from Givas until Antipas, and they all died during a single period because they did not treat each other with respect. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and ask you the question of why now, right? God could do anything. God could have made the plague happen after Shavuot or before Pesach or, Tisha B'Av time. Why specifically, what's the significance of their death during this time? I just want to clarify a couple of things, and we're going to go into a little bit later on, talk about what does it mean they didn't respect each other. Because who were these 24,000 students? These were Rabbi Akiva's students, Rabbi Akiva, who we learned a little bit about last week, was a great Torah scholar, great Torah sage. And these were the students that were going to continue on the Torah, right? So we're not talking about just anyone. We're going to try and understand what does it mean they didn't respect one another, what they were rude to each other, what does it mean? And the other thing to bear in mind, the other part of it is that if you know about Jewish history, we've gone through a lot of tragedies, right? Not every tragedy is commemorated. In fact, I would probably say most are not, right? We only sort of commemorate those things that there's something for us to learn from, like something that we still need to kind of fix and work on in it. So this is the time period where we're getting ready to go receive the Torah. Right, it's called the Spirit Omer, which is talking about the barley sacrifice that they brought on Pesach. On Pesach, in the times of the temple, they brought a sacrifice that was from barley. Came Shavuot, they gave a sacrifice that was from wheat, and it's symbolic of barley is more like animal food, and wheat is more like human food, right? Like we make breads from barley, from wheat, much more than we make from barley, right? So, and the symbolism here is that this period of time between Pesach and Shavuot is a time period where we're supposed to move away from our animalistic self and move into our higher human nature. And in fact, like each of the 7 days of the 7 weeks has a character trait that we're supposed to be working on. If we have time later, I can share some of those ideas with you at the end of the class if we have time. So we're moving from more of an animalistic state to a higher state, because Torah is not just a book that we open up and we look at and we learn, but it's supposed to be something that transforms us as people. It's supposed to transform us. It's not like other intellectual studies, but there's a story that's told, and I don't remember the details, of a professor of ethics who was called out for his not such great ethics that he had in his own individual life. And he turned around to people that called him out on it and said, why? Just because I teach ethics, does that mean that I have to be an ethical person? Right? Like if I was a professor of geometry, would you expect me to be a triangle? Right? So Torah is not like that, right? If you're a Torah teacher, you're held to a higher standard, right? If you are a student of Torah, then you're supposed to, it's supposed to make us better. Incidentally, this is why Torah was given in 2 parts, right? It was given in the written, and alongside it was given the oral Torah, because it's not supposed to be just a book that you open up and you read and you put back on the shelf and wow, that was very interesting. It's supposed to be something that you study from someone who lives a certain way, right? So you can actually learn how to live and how to be, and how from someone who's actually done that, who's learned from someone before them, someone through the time. right? Now, to make the question even stronger about what does it mean that these students didn't respect each other? I don't know if we spoke about this last week. Did we speak about Rabbi Akiva and his mantra of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha?
No, we didn't get to that.
I don't think we got to that. So one of Rabbi Akiva's mantras, right? And when it says Hu haya Omer, he used to say, it means he used to live this way, right? This was something that he said again and again, was V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you should love others like yourself. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a big principle in Judaism, in Torah. So here you have this rabbi, right? This teacher who's all about, or a lot about, loving others. And for some reason, his students didn't respect each other. How's that possible?
Strange.
If I could be so bold, as individuals and as a nation, still need to work on respecting others. So let's talk a little about it. What does it mean to love someone else?
To accept them.
What does it mean to love someone else? But
I was just gonna say, I'm thinking of it as when you have a baby, the baby can't do anything for you. So you love the baby and so you want to give to the baby. And it's just like your kids, you want to give to them even though they're not gonna reciprocate.
So you think love is giving?
A big part of it is giving.
I would agree.
it's interesting. Rav Dessler, who is a prolific Torah writer, says that actually giving builds love. And I think if you think about it, if you want to use the parent-child analogy, right, it's in some ways it's easier to love a newborn than it is to love a teenager. And part of that is because when you're in that newborn stage, you're giving so intensely, right? You're giving so intensely. And sometimes in a healthy relationship, the way to increase love is by giving to each other, right? In a healthy relationship.
I don't think love has to be where you have to be like connected like this. Like we're not supposed to be like best friends with like I don't think that's possible. But I think we can deeply care for others and not wish, like I think there's even in the Gemara it talks about like this rabbi that there was somebody that was really doing something wrong to him, and he's like, I just wish that he was dead. And then the wife goes, maybe you should wish that he turned himself around and like come back to Hashem. And it was like, I think that's love, like wishing the best for everybody. And you don't have to love them. You could still not like what that person's doing, but still want like.
Progress.
That's fantastic.
Instead of wishing them.
I think is about an appreciation for the object of one's love, right? So when someone loves someone else, it's about appreciating them for something, right? And Rabbi Akiva says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," right? You have to love others like you love yourself, which obviously means that you got to
Love yourself.
love yourself, right? Because if a person doesn't like themselves, that doesn't give them a license to go there and go, oh, I don't have to like anyone else either, right? I don't have to love anyone either. No, we have to love and respect ourselves as well. And we in some ways we love and respect to the extent that we love and respect ourselves. All right. Like sometimes we see this in if there's a quality that we value. Right? For example, someone values kindness and you see that in someone else, you'll love them for that, right? You'll have an appreciation for what they have. So love is the appreciation for and the respect for the other person, right? Now, Ben Azai says that the Torah is the book of man, right? A human being was created in God's image, right? And the Torah is kind of our guidebook that helps us develop our potential to be godlike, right? It tells us how do we go from, moving away from our animalistic self and moving into our higher human self. The Torah is a guidebook, right? It teaches us things like stay far away from telling lies and 113. I shouldn't be
stuff.
Yeah, don't be envious and don't kill and don't take revenge and keep Shabbat and keep kosher, and right, it tells us so many different ways of how to develop ourselves so that we're able to become our higher selves. Now, here's the thing about the Torah. I actually learned this from one of my kids yesterday in the school they go to, which they're writing a Sefer Torah. And one of my kids came home from school and said, did you know that the Torah only becomes a Sefer Torah when they write the last letter? So I was like, oh, I didn't actually know that. She said, and he said to me, yes, because the law is, the halacha is that if the Torah has hundreds and thousands of letters in, something like 600,000 letters, yes, in it. If one letter is missing, the entire Torah is not valid, is invalid. They can't use it, right? This is something.
Just correct it, they just.
Yes, they can correct it.
Okay,
But let's say on Shabbat they open up the Torah and they see that there's a letter missing.
yeah,
They would not be able to use it until it gets fixed. Right. So, and if someone writes a Torah and doesn't finish the last letter, it never became a Torah. Right. It's once it's complete is when it becomes a Torah. Yes.
I also heard this idea too, that letters can't touch. So there's this idea of like the collective whole, like each individual is important, but is also part of the collective. And like, so they can't like,
merge into
we can't merge
each
into
other.
each other. Like,
It's also romantic love is like very much depicted as merging yourself with someone else, which is not healthy.
right, that's like a codependency. And I think
Not-
even,
Yeah. Not in Torah. In
Yeah.
Torah, that the Torah ideal is reflected in the words for to get married, which is nisuim, marriage, and it's literally if it means the plural of carrying. And it's two individuals who turn around to each other and say, I will carry you no matter how heavy you get.
That's cool.
But it has to be two individuals that say that to each other.
yeah,
Right.
it can't be one.
Can't be one.
Yes.
I mean, it's a bigger topic.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, the idea is that the more you throw yourself into the relationship, the more you grow as an individual, right? So you become a we and a complete individual. I can't remember who says this, but it says that marriage is the greatest personal development
Oh, yeah.
project
I thought
ever. I was just going to say that I'm not sure which one is. Anyway, let's going back to what Rachel kind of said is Rachel's sharing an idea which basically is just like the Torah is invalid if even one letter is missing. There's this idea that so too are the living manifestations of the Torah, which are the Jewish people. The Jewish people, if it's missing even one Jew, it's incomplete, which is an unbelievable concept if you think about it, right?
But what do you mean? People die all the time that are Jewish.
Beautiful question. Beautiful
Okay.
question. So it means that Jewish history over time, right? Hashem has a plan for the Jewish people, right? And for the Jewish people, for what the Jewish people are going to do in this world. So it means that if even one Jew doesn't step up and do their part, it's not like, oh, it doesn't matter, we'll find someone else. That part is incomplete. Which is again, it's a mind-blowing concept because
You have to be there.
it's not like if I don't show up, there's millions of others Jews, who cares? No, if you don't show up, there is no one else that can step into that place, right? Every single Jew is important and valid.
Today is the day that Hashem has decided the world could not live without you. Like, yay, happy birthday. It's so cute, but it's like, I think it's such a beautiful thing that like, literally, I mean, like, that's why you're born on that day, and that's why that day is so important. Like, you needed to exist, and Hashem was like, now.
So just to wrap that up, but if you think about that, right? If the entire Jewish people is incomplete because a Jew is not showing up or a Jew is not, doing their part, how much respect does every single Jew deserve? Let's go back to the Torah for a second, right? Torah, if that letter isn't there, is incomplete, right? How valuable is that letter? Very valuable, because that letter's missing. The entire Torah is incomplete, right? Go compare it. The Jewish people is the same thing. So if this Jew, right, is part of the Jewish people, meaning that the entire Jewish people need this Jew. How valuable is this Jew? Extremely valuable, right? And we should see that. We should see the value, the worthiness in every single person, including in ourselves, right? And what happened to the Rabbi Akiva students is this was their failure, right? That they failed to hear this message sufficiently, right? Doesn't mean necessarily that they treated each other rudely or whatever, but these were going to be the transmitters of Torah, and they failed to appreciate the honor and respect that every single Jew is deserving, right? Now, how did they come to do that is a question we'll do in a minute, and we'll look at in a moment. But before we do that, now we can understand why this happened at this time, because as we prepare to get the Torah, it's a message that's fundamental to receiving the Torah, right? We have to understand the value of ourselves and the value of every single Jew, because we're together as a people are what is fulfilling God's mission in this world, right? And that's tremendous value. And because they didn't see it, that's why it's at this time that that it happens. But what does it mean? What does it mean that they failed to see the value in other people, right? These are people that were great holy Torah scholars, right? They were going to be the transmitters of Torah to the next generation, right? At the end of it, when they all passed away, Rabbi Akiva took 5 students and replaced them with them, right? And these 5 students were Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Kabbalah, right? Like incredible Torah scholars. So they were very, very holy people. How can it be that they failed to see the value in each other? What happens is that this was the first generation after the destruction of the second temple. And perhaps they felt like, yes, we're studying the Torah, and yes, we're going to transmit it. But who are we compared to the generations above us, right? The generations that had the temple, and they were right on some level, right? They were right because there's something called Yeridat Hadoros, right? That the generations become spiritually weaker, right? You can't compare Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov to later generations. You can't compare the scholars in the Talmud to rabbis we have today, right? So on some level, they were right that we can't compare ourselves to previous generations. But here's where they failed to understand that is that they were kind of like midgets standing on the shoulders of a giant, right? Imagine there's a giant and a midget walking through a field, and they come to a really big wall, and the giant tries to climb over, and it's too tall. So the midget's like, forget about it. Why should I even try? Like, if you can't climb over it, then how am I even going to climb over it? And the giant says, right? I'll lift you up, and I'll carry you over, and you can do what the giant couldn't do, right? Why? Because you're standing on their shoulders. It's the same thing. There's an interesting story that's told about Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva's students were falling asleep once in his class. So what did he do? He sort of gave them like this question to pique their curiosity. He says, what enabled Esther to rule over 127 provinces? Esther, who was in the time of Ahasuerus, what gave her the merit to become the queen, right, of 127 provinces? And he answered it, and he says that Esther was a descendant of Sarah, who lived for 127 years. There's a deeper message in this story, right? Rabbi Akiva what does it mean his students were falling asleep? What is that symbolic of? They had low self-esteem, right? They didn't think of themselves so much. And he's telling them, listen, Esther was also the first generation of exile, right? Just like we are the first generation, then, right? He's telling his students, we are the first generation of exile. So too, Esther was the first generation of exile. And yet she was able to achieve greatness. Why? because she was a descendant of Sarah, right? All those qualities that our ancestors have get passed down to us. So even though we are small and minute, and we may think our part in Jewish history is small in comparison to generations earlier, but we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And our part is valuable. It's interesting because they talk about, intergenerational trauma, right? And sometimes they also talk about intergenerational resilience, right? That just like trauma gets passed down, so too does resilience get passed down, right? We go through things, but we also grow through things, and that also gets passed by, and that accumulative effect of generation after generation and generation, like that we are still the link in the chain, and we haven't lost that chain, is a very strong effect. And it's interesting because we see this as well in the mitzvah of counting the Omer, because the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer is not just to count the individual days, but to count the accumulation of the days. Because, for example, if someone's counting and then they forget a day, then they can't count with the blessing anymore. Why? Because here it's showing that the accumulation of the days is valuable as well, right? And there's so much research about like habits. What is habits? Why are habits so important? Why are changing our habits so important? Because it's the cumulative effect of it, right? You do something once, you wake up early once, right? Big deal, nothing happens. But if you wake up, and even if you wake up like an hour earlier than you would like to, right? Let's say it's a good time to wake up, right? Not an hour too early. Big deal. It doesn't make that much of an impact on your life. But if you make it a habit to wake up, 5-10 minutes earlier and spend that time doing something meaningful every single day, that makes a huge impact on our lives, right? Because it's the cumulative effect of it. And it explains also why we had this strong question that came up last week of that Rabbi Akiva. At the end of the 12 years, he's been away for 12 years, he's coming back, and he overhears his wife saying, someone turning around to his wife and saying, well, why are you putting up with him being away for so long? And he said, well, if it was up to me, I'd let him go for another 12 years. And he turns right away back to go, right? And the question came up, is like, why? Why didn't he go in at least and say, hi, I'm back, how are you? Because
he could lose his incentive.
The accumulation, 12 plus 12 is not the same as 24 straight, right? Like the accumulation of day after day, right? Of generation after generation of our habits over time is so powerful, right? And we see this again in the fact that we don't count 50 days, right? Shavuot is the 50th day. We don't count it. We only count 49 days, right? Because we're counting the pathway, right? The day by day by day, doing each thing. And then what happens is the response of that accumulation of all those day by days is often so much greater than what we just kind of like if we were to add it all up. So we don't just count day 50, because the getting of the Torah is something that is a result of us doing spending every day doing a little bit of effort into becoming a little bit of a better person.
Well, it reminds me of what you said about, or what we all said about, that every Jewish person counts and that every letter in the Torah counts. So I think what you're saying here is that you can't take one out of the counting because every day counts.
Yeah,
it's a similar idea.
If a fellow Jew is a baddie, though, like they're just a bad person, do they still count?
So it's a very complex question, right? Because the Derech Hashem, which is a book that's called The Way of God, right, talks about like how God runs the world, etc. Talks about a good person versus a bad person. And it says that, how do you define a good person?
Well, certainly someone who has a code of ethics and moral clarity on how to treat other humans and things. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to summarize in a couple of sentences, but
Right. So interestingly, the Derech Hashem puts it in a very it gives a definition for it. And he says, sorry, a good person is someone whose impact, the majority of the impact of their actions is good, versus a bad person, the majority of the impact of their actions is bad.
It's interesting.
Who gets to decide?
yeah.
Brilliant question.
How do you decide what's good and bad? It's not
Brilliant
that.
question. There's only one that can decide, and that is God. Because we even for ourselves, we can't decide that. We can't decide that the majority of the impact of it's not even my actions, right? It's the majority of my actions is good, right? We have no way of knowing that. And interestingly enough, that's why we're told no worries. And I'll leave. I'll just close it. Thank you. We're supposed to think of ourselves as what's called a Beinomi, right? Someone who's in between, right? We are supposed to think of ourselves as perfectly poised between good and bad. And the next thing that I do right now is going to determine whether I'm good or bad. Imagine if you could live with that concept, right? With that mindset. Imagine how much we would choose, how much more we would choose the good, right? If I know the next thing that I do is going to turn me into a good person, right? If I make a good choice, it's going to turn me into a good person. We don't know, right? So the first thing is we don't know who's a good person and who's a bad person, right? We don't know the impact of their actions. We don't know the struggles, right? People are born with different struggles. Some people are born in, very disadvantaged circumstances, with difficult personality, with difficult upbringing, right? God takes all of that into account. And as long as a person is alive, there's a chance for them to repair and to do back, to fix it. So yes, every single Jew has potential and is valuable. And I think it goes back to what the story that Rachel shared from the Talmud is the rabbi who said, he prayed for these evil people to be destroyed, and his wife turned around to him and said, no, don't pray for that. Pray that their evil is destroyed. Pray that they become. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.